So just as a little bit of background, for those of you who are here in the audience, we are members of the advisory committee for minimum standards for law enforcement agencies, TCOL. In this last legislative session that passed Senate Bill 1445, and when they do the sunset commission meetings for TCOL, this is one of the things that the legislature asked to be looked at. And so what we're doing is we're looking at the standards that are set forth whenever somebody goes to create a law enforcement agency. But the reason all of you are invited, made aware of this, is because some of these things may become part of our regular points of compliance. Whenever TCOL comes in to take a look at our folders, there may be some additional points of compliance. So in all fairness, everybody who is part of that process needs to know what's going on and have a voice before anything is ever finalized. So with that, we'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. If TCOL wants to go ahead and conduct a roll call of the members.
Thank you, Sheriff Boyd. As a matter of just housekeeping, I want to remind everybody that's coming in on a virtual status that your audio and your visual must be available to you throughout the entire meeting to be considered present on the official meeting's minutes for today. So if you have any questions or concerns, please let us know. Wildly raise your hand if you need to get us to recognize that you're having a problem. We'll see what we can do to assist, but for the most part, just keeping going. We haven't had any problems with that in the past, but we want to keep it going that way today. Please turn your audio off if you are not actively speaking. It will help with all of the back and forth visual and audio bouncing. Okay, today's roll call. Sheriff Roy Boyd.
Here.
Chief Jaime Ayala.
I'm here.
Chief Bill Avera. Paul Christ.
Here.
Chief Solomon Cook.
Here.
Bob Ladia. Chief Ronald Phillips.
Here.
Constable Derek Rose.
I'm here.
Marvin Riles. Chief Derek Watson.
Here.
And John Wilkerson.
I am present.
We have a quorum.
Thank you very much. We will now move on to item number 2, which is a review and take action on meeting minutes from November 28, 2023 advisory committee meeting. Review and take action on amendment made to the meeting from October 9th, 2023 advisory committee meeting. Discuss and take action on any other advisory committee procedural and parliamentary matters if necessary. Has everybody had the opportunity to review the minutes that were provided to us?
Yes.
Does anybody have any questions or concerns with regards to those minutes? Hearing none, I will ask for a motion to accept as presented.
Watson makes a motion that we accept our minutes.
I'll second it.
Who is that in second?
Phillips.
Thank you.
All right. All those in favor?
Aye. Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. So we will move on to item number 3 for the benefit of those individuals that are here. And we're going to just discuss and take action on matters related to developing minimum standards with respect to the creation or continued operation of law enforcement agencies based on function, size, jurisdiction of the agency as established under Texas Occupational Code 1701.163. And then we have review and discussion. But for those who have not looked at 1701.163, the statutory procedures with regards to starting and maintaining a law enforcement agency, there are 7 primary areas here, which we are taking a look at and considering. Number 1 is a determination regarding public benefit of creating an agency. 2 is the sustainable funding source for the agency. 3 is physical resources available to officers, including standard duty firearms, less lethal force weapons, including a requirement of at least 1 per officer on duty, effective communications equipment, protective equipment, including a requirement of at least 1 bullet-resistant vest per officer on duty, officer uniforms, and patrol vehicles and associated equipment. Number 4 is the physical facilities of an agency, including any evidence room, dispatch area, or public area. Number 5 is the policies of an agency, including the policies on use of force, vehicle pursuit, professional conduct of officers, domestic abuse protocols, the response of missing persons, supervision of part-time officers, impartial policing, active shooters, and barricaded subjects. Number 6 is the administrative structure of an agency. Number 7 is liability insurance. And they also included number 8, which is any other standards the commission considers necessary. So these are the things that we've been asked to take a look at, make recommendations on, which has to be done, finalized sometime prior to a time in March. So these are the items that we've been working on. Now we'll have a review and discussion and any action, and we'll start off with one of the things that TCOL has put together for us is a matrix, and y'all be able to look at it. I didn't print copies of it because it's so big. I can't print it on my printer. I had to have a dispatcher make it for me. But taking a look at a matrix that goes over these issues along with all the various types of law enforcement agencies that there are across the state of Texas. Things like railroad police, water district police, port police, a lot of those different things. So no one size fits all. So we're trying to put this in some sort of matrix and break it down because kind of like you were talking about, you know, you have to go to a landline because you don't have radio communications in much of your county. Not everything is going to work everywhere. So we're doing our best to try to break all this down and try to see where all the issues are going to be. We'll never find them all, but we're doing our best to try to sit down and go through them. I believe, Chief, you had a recommendation with regards to the matrix.
Well, so I'm talking to the committee right now, but the matrix, I really liked it. My suggestion would be is we have different police officer groups grouped into 5 groups. So kind of based on their functionality, municipal policing, city marshals, state of Texas would be group 2. Sheriff's constables would be group 3, district attorney's office, county attorney's group 4. And my recommendation would be just for ease of creating the charts and giving us some more room as the folks that are delineating and explaining all the different categories is that we run the groups across the top of the chart and we run the descriptions for equipment, facilities, policies, insurance, funding, all of that stuff goes vertically. Right now it's mapped out. We'd have a huge Excel spreadsheet. If I was a little bit more confident with Excel spreadsheets, I'd change it around for you, but I can't. But I'm proposing that we run the officers across the top and all the details run from top to bottom, if that makes sense. If you've looked at the chart.
Yep,
and any input from the board.
That's not a problem. When we get the final product, I think we'll be able to make it easier to read and manipulate. And this will lend itself to being on a website where they can click a link and go to a page that has more information on theirs. It'll be easier to read and print. So I can
yes, sir.
For the next meeting. That's not a problem.
Okay. And yeah, absolutely is. We can edit it because once we download it, we can edit it. But again, I think we're looking more for your guidance on how y'all want that, since it's going to be in-house for you. So for the edification of the people in this room, we're talking about a really large subject: funding, rules, policies, types of equipment, facilities, and I think there is a recognition from TCOL that we're developing minimal standards. We're not detailing every specific thing that you have to have in a squad car, for example. But there are certain baseline things that I think the state is very concerned about. For example, when I started with the Dallas Police Department, incredibly violent, busy city, but we were bold enough to send officers out into the street without radios on each officer. Like, we didn't even have enough to check out to put on the officers. So one person would be the radio guy and one person would be the cover officer. It's not a good way to do business, in my opinion. And I think functionally, it's okay to have a minimum standard that requires a radio for each officer that's on duty per shift. I'm not saying a radio for every single officer. That's very expensive. What I am saying is that when we're developing these minimum standards, it's in the best interest of the community and the mission of law enforcement to have some set standards. So when a small community decides to stand up a police department, and I apologize, I forget how many agencies we've stood up over the past couple of years. Was it 130 agencies over the past 3 years? Is that correct, Tico? Oh, caught him off guard. Okay.
It was a lot.
We've stood up triple digits of agencies over the past 3 years. A large majority of those have been with school districts, as y'all can imagine. And we just want to make sure that the care and feeding of the officers or the commission officers in the state of Texas is being done correctly. So we're going to talk about, I would urge you to read the law. And then if you have any input, I'm literally right down the road in Plainview. I'm glad to take phone calls anytime, emails. And if there's something that you want to see as a minimum for sheriffs or municipal police chiefs, I would be glad to take that information and float it in there. I don't have any anticipation that you'd have suggestions today, but thank you.
Thank you. So, and I will say, for those of you here, I know Major Vineyard, we've talked, and he's very sensitive to the fact that, not one shoe fits all. And so there's a lot of variables that go into it. And so T-Cole's very understanding about that. So is anybody else on the committee? Do you have any input with regards to the matrix that was created at this point in time? I know that Mr. Christ was part of helping recommend this and get this moving forward. Is there anything that you have, sir?
No, they've done a good job of whittling it down, because some of the standards I brought from the Texas Police Chief Association, it was a list of about 65. And, we got a lot of different agencies with a lot of different needs. So I think it's a good job, making it manageable.
I agree. I think we've got a really good start on it. It's going to take quite a bit of work to get it ironed out all the way, but we do have a good start on what we need as far as a document, so that sheriffs, chiefs, and everybody else can go through, and we'll be able to look at that, and it'll be something that's easy to go through. So I think that was a really good idea. So thank you, sir. If nothing else, then we'll move on to statutory considerations and our groups that we had, and I will just go down the list of the statutory considerations and see if we have any updated input from any of the working groups that are working on those. And I'll start with number 1, which is the public benefit of creating an agency. Does that group have any updates with regards to considerations on that? If not, then I will move on to number 2, which is sustainable funding. I know Wilkerson had been working on that. Is there any update on that at this point in time?
Sheriff, I don't have any updates on that. I will say it's become quite a cumbersome task when you look at the different types of agencies out there and how they receive their funding. I'm still in exploratory process with a lot of that, looking to see how some of these, like municipal utility districts that may have a police department, how, what's their, how are they getting funded? And then you got your colleges, and that's a question that I would probably have for T-Cole as well. When we're talking about sustainable funding, I think we got to be really cautious, correct me if I'm wrong, that we're not infringing on the rights of, say, a commissioner's court or a city council. And, it's especially with sheriff's offices and constables' offices. That's, I remember during the session, there was a lot of issue that was brought up take, for example, in Senate Bill 1445, the legislature wanted TCO to have the ability to bring action against an agency. And there's actually verbiage in the bill that talks about the ability to deny them from licensing peace officers for that agency. But there was a conversation point that came up regarding the constitutionality of it when it comes to elected officials. And I believe I heard somebody saying earlier about categorizing, the police departments, sheriff's offices, and constables' offices were conjoined together with that conversation. And I think we also need to be mindful of the fact that we still do have 2 police departments in the state of Texas that have elected chiefs of police. So, is there any guidance from TCO? I think I see Mr. Beecham there. Any guidance on just what authority TCO would actually have over requiring appropriate funding?
Well, I think the response is, as we've discussed before, it's certainly within the parameters of this committee. It's whatever this committee determines is what TCO has the authority over to execute on it. I mean, whether or not whatever that policy is decided upon is going to be too much or too stringent or not stringent enough, I mean, that's a different question. But if the question is just, can the committee and the rule it proposes to TCO and the rule that it will ultimately finalize, the authority is there because it's in statute. What the specific policy and what if any thresholds on dollar amounts that the committee puts out there, that's certainly subject to any policy debate, not one of authority.
Understood, sir. Appreciate that.
Just real quick, if from our previous discussions, I think the main concern was the funding of law enforcement or the attempt to fund law enforcement through citations. If I'm not mistaken, I believe that was our number one concern when it came to dealing with the funding of law enforcement and the development of quotas as an effort to make up for budgetary shortfalls. Is that correct? I know we've had some discussions on that. So, I mean, outside of that, I'm not sure where we're going to have much authority, but we will just have to, I guess, we will just have to go through that process and take a look. And I know that was a primary concern for us as well as for Mr. Lydia, I think he's on a cruise this week. So,
Sheriff?
Sheriff, did we get a consensus from the group as far as, I know I threw out a number of, I believe it was 20 or 25%, no more than that can be used from citation to revenue. And I apologize for not being able to be present during the last meeting, but was there any more discussion on that, or did the group come to a consensus on whether or not that number is feasible?
no, we didn't come to a conclusion on any of the percentages. I think the biggest thing for us is just taking a look at the case law and the statutory and making sure that it falls within that it doesn't jeopardize anything on the law side. Because I can't remember, I know the comptroller come in and take your sales tax. Is it 25 or 30% is the threshold that the state uses? Is that correct?
Yes, sir. It's 30%, but at 20%, that's that other documentation that I've sent to you. Once a city, municipality, once they reach 20% of their budget, they have to notify the comptroller's office. And I guess that's the way I interpret it. That's a signifier to the comptroller's office that this particular location is getting close and that they need to keep an eye on it, which is why I recommended potentially that being in the whatever rules that we're presenting to TCO to adopt, is that the agency has to have a policy on it and then submit proof that they notified the comptroller that they hit 20%.
Yeah, and I believe during the last meeting, we discussed about the possibility of during the time of racial data profiling, that may also be something that has to be reported at that same point in time. Much like under Senate Bill 22, where we're going to have to go back and present our previous county budgets to prove some certain things on that funding. It may be something that has to be done on an annual basis as part of racial data profiling in that packet with everything else.
Well, Sheriff, I don't mean to keep talking, but Sheriff, with that being said, would you like for me to present or put together some verbiage to put out to the group for the next meeting?
Yes, sir. Please.
Okay. I'll get that taken care of.
Appreciate it.
Sheriff, can I make
Go ahead.
one
Yes,
suggestion?
Chief.
So, and I may be misunderstanding, but I really thought the intent of the legislation was to talk about funding for new police agencies, not existing, that it was to focus on new. That's one point. The second, I would make the suggestion that if you're standing up a small municipal agency or you're standing up a school district agency, that we take a look at the ratio, what it costs to put a police officer in the street in that county, for example. Every county has a sheriff's department. We could use that as the baseline of what it costs to put a deputy in the field, and what every municipality wants to match that, prepare a line item budget showing that they're properly funding for their jurisdiction law enforcement. Law enforcement costs differently across the state. I don't think anybody in the room would disagree with that. But if you put together a line item budget that at least mirrors what it costs in your county, and then you prove up that you have the funding for that, I think that would meet the minimum statutory requirement, and we don't get too wrapped around the axle. It's already statutorily mandated how much money you can get out of citations. And realistically, most agencies are not living off citations. That's the minority of agencies. And I get it. It's ugly when it happens, but that's not the vast majority of agencies in Texas. So my suggestion, or just a suggestion, that they prepare a line item budget and submit it for TCOL. Agree, disagree?
And that may be something that's part of that training we discussed during the last meeting. You know, you weren't there, Mr. Wilkerson, but one of the things that came up was the possibility of, if a governmental body wishes to develop or form a new law enforcement agency, that there be some sort of training that they have to go through, whether it be online or whatnot, to go through all of these requirements and ensure that they're doing it correct. And I always go back to the town where I'm at, where that was their goal. They were going to form a police department, and they thought they could fund the entire thing off traffic tickets. And they were, you know, very upset when I explained to them that they could not do that. But I think you're right, that predominantly it's that new agencies that they're looking at to show. So, but I would appreciate it if, you put something together so that we can take a look at it and have some in-depth discussion about it.
Sheriff, can I add a little something?
Go ahead, Chief Cook.
Yeah. Okay. Good evening, everyone. And I had tried to say something earlier, but I guess my mic was blanked. In reference to my group, one of the things that I really focused on, and I've talked with agencies in my area and across the state, we have so many new ISDs that are popping up right now, and people that are trying to become new agencies. One of the concerns that we have for new agency ISDs is the physical location. And everyone is just opposed to them putting a police agency inside of a high school. There's a safety issue, also confidentiality is out the window. So, I think that we just need to try to guide them a different direction than putting one inside of a school building. And a second part, one of the things that Limits is now doing in the new chiefs training, they are now giving the new ISD chiefs a 4-hour 101 ISD chief training. And a majority of those people in there, and myself and Bill Ibarra have gone to, in the past 2 years, a lot of the new chiefs training. And most of those people are brand new to ISDs. Some of them have not promoted up in the ranks. They've come from a county agency, a municipal agency, and ISD is a whole new world for them. And I really feel like that what they did, that 4-hour block, is good. But most of those people, they need some intensive training because they're lost.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Sheriff,
Yes.
this is Colin Grissom from TCOL. To give a little background on the sustainable funding, what we've historically looked at new agency startups is required them to present a line item budget to us outlining the law enforcement agency. We haven't made a value judgment on their numbers. Is it good? Is it bad? But what we've tried to make them do is differentiate between, I have a pot of money called the general fund, but they haven't broken out the law enforcement costs individually. So what we've made them produce is a line item budget detailing the law enforcement agency as an entity within the budget. And so again, we TCOL have not made a value judgment of that's not enough money, it's too much money, whatever it is. But we've had to make several of them think through the budgeting to begin with. You know, so really what we've been asking on inspection is we want to see that the city or the school district or whomever has actually thought about a unique budget for the police agency, where you can see liability insurance costs, vehicle maintenance, you know, fuel, all of those costs separated from a larger budget. So and that's been long standing. That's not new to this legislation. That we've been looking at some version of a budget from them on the startup.
It's important to remember, though, that that part of the statute did change. So we previously required that they establish the funding sources for the agency, which is when we were looking at that. Now they have said they want them to prove that they have a sustainable funding source. And I think the word sustainable indicates the focus of the change there. And Sheriff, I did think last time we talked about citations, but we also talked about grant funding, that they couldn't be primarily funded from grants that were going to expire, that we didn't consider those sustainable. They could supplement with those, but that could not be the primary basis for establishing an agency. And then the last thing, I think, to Chief Watson's point, is that the statute previously applied to just the creation of new agencies, but it has changed and it is now applied to the continuing operation of all agencies. So again, I think that they took the focus from, these are the standards to create an agency, now these are the ongoing standards to maintain an agency. So the budget requirements are not a one-time thing. They want to show sustainable funding plans to continue the agency.
Appreciate it very much. Thank you. You know, and I know it's going to be difficult because those targets, you know, like you discussed with regards to funding levels and whatnot, change from year to year. So that's something we're going to have to take into consideration, because it can't get too far into the weeds, or it's something that have to be readdressed every 6 to 12 months, and y'all don't have time or the manpower to do that, and you got better things to do anyway. So we're going to have to make sure that whatever our recommendations are, there's something that are going to be broad enough for y'all to have the leeway you need to make the decisions you need to make without being, you know, strung up by restrictive language being put into those recommendations. So.
And Sheriff, I want to reiterate that I think having annual reporting requirements where each agency is submitting a budget will allow us to build data over a period of, say, 5 years, where then we can make an evaluation for similar agencies, like Chief Watson said, in similar areas with similar structure, and then find those outliers, those that are substantially underfunded or substantially overfunded. We just don't have the data to make those kind of assessments right now, but we can start the process that would allow us to go back and do that in a few years.
Considering the majority of the sheriffs are already going to have to do that under SB 22, this would probably be a really good time to get that started. Does anybody else have anything on sustainable funding sources?
Sheriff?
Yes.
Yeah, it's John Wilkerson. Just a quick question. Talking about what you guys are fixing to have to start doing on Senate Bill 22 and what TCOL is recommending to get a database started. And with this being not only the creation of a law enforcement agency, but the continued operation of that, what's the committee's thoughts on requiring agencies to conduct either annual or biannual salary surveys in their area? Just kind of close enough, because somebody mentioned earlier, kind of using a reference point would be a sheriff's office as far as, you know, what law enforcement is going to cost, but having an agency, the agency itself conduct that and make that part of that reporting documentation that's sent over to TCOL.
That's never come up. I think there's so many variables that I think there's some issues with doing that. I mean, if you're up in Lincecum County, for example, up in the corner. You know, I mean, it's a long way around to get a salary survey, and, you know, one county is completely different than the next, just as one municipality. So I think if we start going down that rabbit hole, personally, I think we're gonna find that we're creating a lot of work that a lot of agencies do not possess the manpower or time to conduct. I mean, I'll use Terrell County as a good example. I mean, they're way out in the middle of nowhere in Sanderson, Texas. It's a sheriff and 2 deputies. You know, he really can't compare himself to Brewster County, which is Alpine. He really can't compare himself to Valverde County, which has got about 50,000 people in it, nor his neighbors to the north. So I think that because of the geographic isolation of some places and the lack of manpower, that it will make it difficult. Because I'll tell you, even in my agency, there's data I would love to track, but I don't have the personnel just to even get it all entered into spreadsheets. Because I love numbers, but I don't have the manpower to put them all where they need to go. So I think we're going to have to be very careful with that. Because, I mean, there's some things we're going to have to in order to receive grant funding, and we might as well move it on over to TCOL as well so that they have access to that data. But we need to be very cautious about putting too much of a burden on agencies, especially smaller agencies that lack the manpower resources to get some of this stuff done. Anything else on that side from anybody? If not, I guess we'll go to number 3, physical resources available to officers. Anybody have any update on that or any thoughts or concerns?
I'm still putting a list together. I like the matrix. The other thing that I was thinking of, we've got some agencies, according to our TCO printout, thanks for the information. And one that came to mind was we've got 128 district attorneys, and they have licensed peace officers as investigators and stuff. And I think that maybe, and I don't know how we want to do this, by survey or just talking to the folks in our area, those investigators, although they're licensed peace officers, their duties are different than, you know, a sheriff's office or municipality or a school district police out, you know, patrolling and observing. Maybe get some input on them, what they feel on their side would be minimum equipment or standards for their guys. I mean, I'm sure there's going to be some commonality that has to be met, but so that we don't leave those guys out. Any input on that?
I will tell you that Major Vineyard and I had a little bit of a conversation about this because there are some district attorneys that are looking at proactive task force. I know that the gentleman running for Wilson County, district attorney outside of Bexar County, he reached out to me and wanted to replicate our task force through his district attorney's office should he be elected. So, you know, that would be an interdiction task force. The Clayburgh County attorney has a interdiction task force. So I think we're going to have to look at, kind of like you're talking about, I think we're also going to need to look at the fact that some of these actually have proactive law enforcement elements, even though they are the prosecutor's office. So I think as we go through, they're like district attorneys, you may have investigators, those that just have investigators, and those that have proactive law enforcement. Those
Right.
are some considerations we'll have to take.
Exactly.
So, because you're right, there's going to be a lot of unique situations.
So Chief, a couple of things. First, they are broken out in their own group 4 for the reasons that you cited, that they generally are plainclothes, different responsibilities, out on patrol, that they have different equipment issues. Gary, our captain who does the inspections at those agencies, is familiar with that and has met with them and understands a lot of that. That's where we try to come up with the baseline stuff that's in here. The conversation I had with Sheriff Boyd was about that in particular. Colin likes to tell a story about one of the fire marshal's office that is now working traffic out on a toll road. That's well outside the expectations of what we think a fire marshal's office normally does. So I think if that is a concern of this group, what we would have to try to capture in the rule is that at the time you apply for an agency, you describe the structure and operations of your agency, and if that changes substantially, right? If you are a DA's office, you're going to have 3 plainclothes investigators that support executing subpoenas and doing follow-up investigations for DAs, that's one thing. But if you're going to create a task force where you're going out, doing search warrants, working as part of a task force and doing things outside that you would have to be structured more in line with agencies that normally do those things. So once you change responsibilities from what you put in your application, you would have to change your requirements accordingly. I think that's the only way we would capture something like that. Same thing with the fire marshal's office. It now shifts to traffic enforcement from what they normally do. You're going to have to adjust to an agency that's more in line with.
Great. Could you ask Gary to get a hold of me just so I can get some backfill on that, please?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Anybody have anything else on statutory consideration number 3, physical resources availability of the officers? If not, we'll move to number 4. And I know that Chief Cook had brought up some that would fall into this a while ago, the physical facilities of an agency. So does anybody else have anything on that? Not, we'll go to number 5, policies. Any update on with regards to policies? We'll move to number 6, administrative structure. No, Chief was looking at that as well. Chief Phillips. Anybody have any updates on that?
No, sir, I don't.
Okay. Then liability insurance with regards item number 7, liability insurance statute.
Is
Probably going to
Paul,
be one that's.
yeah, Sheriff is Paul. When it comes to liability, if the departments are, when they're starting up, new departments, they just need to understand.
Breaking up.
What's that? Oh, okay. All right. Anyway, departments need to understand it's not just liability. It's going to be auto liability, workers' comp, law enforcement liability, and there's no one go-to to get these coverages. The TAC on the county side, of course, TML on the municipal side. There's also TASB for the school side, and there's other insurance providers out there, but there's not like a chart that they can go to and say it's going to cost this much for this many officers, because underwriting has to be involved in making those decisions. And so it can get a little complicated, and whoever the agency, the entity, the city, the school district, or whoever, they need to do a lot of homework whenever they're finding out what these amounts are going to be, because they can be substantial. That's all I have.
Thank you, sir. We appreciate it. And then lastly, the number 8. I know during the last meeting we discussed what Major was talking about, annual or biannual submission of compliance requirements, which would be part of our TCOL inspections and reporting. We also looked at reporting on SRO certificates to TCOL, something we'll have to take into consideration. And then what we talked about a while ago, which is the training requirement for a governing body looking to form a law enforcement agency. So those are some things we're going to have some further discussion on. Nobody's kind of been assigned that, but those are some things we'll have to discuss whenever we have our upcoming meetings. So on those statutory considerations, does anybody else have any alibis with regards to any of that? If not, then what we'll do is we'll move to number 4. Discussion and take action to further advisory committee meeting dates and locations, including video conferencing. I know that on our list, we have our next scheduled meeting is for Tuesday, January 9th in Edinburgh. Are we still good for that, Chief Ayala?
Yes, sir, we are at 1 o'clock, and we'll do it at City Hall in the City Council chambers. Our IT is teed up and ready to be there to make sure that the technical aspect of the meeting is executed well.
All right, can you do me a favor and just send us all the physical address so that T. Cole will be able to make sure they have the right address for the proper posting for that one?
Will do.
Thank you. And I know that we were looking at doing one on let's see, Tuesday, January 23rd in Dallas, Fort Worth, but I had not heard of a location yet. Does anybody have a location for that meeting? If not, I know that I sent out an email, Chief Isla and I talked after the last meeting that we're going to have some workshops to get some of this closed up. And I had proposed the possibility of another meeting in January, the possibly on the 16th there at TCOL to spend about a half a day working on different items. Does anybody have any thoughts with regards to having another meeting on January 16th to have a workshop?
I think that's a great idea.
Anybody else?
Hey, Sheriff, can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Yes, go ahead.
I was up teaching a ledge update class in Bedford last month. That chief was real interested in this committee, mentioned that he'd be willing to host if we wanted to do something there.
Okay, let me reach out to some guys that expressed from the committee. So I know some folks on the committee expressed the possibility of hosting, but if not, I think that'd be a great idea.
Okay.
So Bedford, you said?
Yes, sir. And then just a generalized statement and question for, I guess, T. Cole on this date that we're coming up in January for a workshop. If I can get a group to sponsor a lunch, to do a working lunch, would that be appropriate, or would we be violating some kind of law with that?
John, let's do this. I don't, off the cuff, I don't see any problem. If it's for this subcommittee, it won't be necessary. It won't be for T. Cole or the staff. It will be for this subcommittee. I think you can do that all day long.
Okay. Well, then, Sheriff, let's work together, and whoever's going to be present, I'll make sure that we get lunch taken care of.
I appreciate it. T. Cole, is that date okay for your facility?
Which date?
If we did January the 16th, what your facility availability is?
I believe that's correct. If we find that there is a conflict for some reason, we'll let you know as soon as we do.
Okay, all right, I appreciate it. Does anybody else have anything on item number 4?
And here at Alvin, we're always open over at Nolan Ryan if it becomes necessary. Just give me a heads up so I can schedule it.
Appreciate it.
And I'm willing to host also in Humble.
Okay. Yeah, I think we had you down up in Humble for Tuesday, February 6th. So it's on that spreadsheet. So if you want to take a look and then let us know an address, if that's good for you. Did T. Cole have something?
This is Sarah Beth. I was just gonna say that if we're confirming January 9th, I do need to know the actual address for City Hall and whether or not there's a office or classroom or room number that we're gonna be in by no later than January 2nd for us to get it posted, but earlier than that? Okay, then we need to have it by December 29th before the New Year break weekend.
Sounds good. I'm sure Chief Island will have it to you.
Okay, I appreciate it.
Yeah, it's going to be 415 West University Drive. I'll send it to you by email. And it's going to be in the open city council chamber. So there's not necessarily a room number.
Okay.
All right, if there's nothing else on that, our next item is number 5, receive any public comment on any topic without action. Any of y'all have any comment or anything on the proceedings of what we're working on? Seeing none, I will thank all of y'all for coming though. Big country up here, and I know some of you got to drive a ways. If there is none, are there any alibis from the committee members or from TCO? If not, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll second it.
All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Nobody's gonna oppose. We're adjourned.